farmers.
All right, we're going to begin our annual meeting by joining voices together in worship. So I'm going to stand, and the music will usher everybody else back into the service. Not ready yet. Not ready yet. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is about 10:52, and I get to call this meeting on October 23rd, 2022, to order. Welcome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I want to start by recognizing Kevin Montgomery and Jana Alexander, who will be taking minutes for the meeting today. So thank you guys for your work on that. And then those will be compiled and brought to us in the next annual meeting for approval. But I wanted to start this morning with an opening prayer. And because this is a community event, and if you've heard me up here, you've probably heard me talk a lot about this is not just the business of the church, but this is the worship of community, reminding ourselves how to do community well together. So I'm going to start with a responsive communal prayer. I will read the light colors and ask you all to join me in the bolded print. So if you would join me in prayer this morning. Our lives are so small, O Lord, our vision so limited, our courage so frail, our hours so fleeting. Therefore, give grace and guidance for the journey ahead. We are gathered here because we believe that we are called together into a work we cannot yet know the fullness of. Still, we trust the voice of the one who has called us. And so we offer to you, O God, these things, our dreams, our plans, our vision. Shape them as you will, our moments and our gifts. May they be invested toward bright, eternal ends. Richly bless the work before us, Father. Shepherd us well, lest we grow enamored of our own accomplishment or entrenched in old habit. Instead, let us listen for your voice, our hearts ever open to the quiet beckonings of your Spirit in this endeavor. Let us, in true humility and poverty of spirit, remain ever ready to move at the impulse of your love in paths of your design. You alone, O God, by your gracious and life-giving Spirit, have power to knit our imperfect hearts, our weaknesses, our strengths, our stories, and our gifts one to another. Unite your people and multiply our meager offerings, O Lord, that all might resound to your glory. May our acts of service and creation, frail and wanting as they are, be met and multiplied by the mysterious workings of your Spirit, who weaves all things together toward a redemption more good and glorious than we have yet eyes to see or courage to hope for. May our love and our labors now echo your love and your labors, O Lord. Let all that we do here in these our brief lives, in this our brief moment to love, in this the work you have ordained for this community, flower in winsome and beautiful foretaste of greater glories to come. O Spirit of God, now shape our hearts. O Spirit of God, now guide our hands. O Spirit of God, now build your kingdom amongst us. Amen. Now, lest anyone get slightly weirded out, because this is not the way we usually do annual meetings, let me just say that I'm not going crazy Pentecostal or weird spiritualistic on you, but I am going to light a candle. And this reflects and reminds us of the fact that Jesus and the Holy Spirit are already here in this place. Nothing magical about it, but I'm going to light the candle as a reminder that Jesus is here with us, and the work that we're doing is the work of community in his presence. All right. We're going to start the business with the approval of last year's minutes. So I need a motion to approve the minutes of the October 17th, 2021 City Church Annual Meeting. Can I have a motion? Motion. Second? Excellent. Any discussion about last year's minutes? They are printed in the packet that you received. All right, no discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Nay. All right, motion so carried. Now, the letters MSC in any meeting mean motion, seconded, carried, but I really like motion so carried, so that's what I say. Motion, seconded, carried. We're off to a good start. Our next point of business this morning, item number 3 on your agenda. Oops, actually, item number 4 on your agenda is to recognize the new members that we have welcomed in the past year. We've met these people in Sunday morning services. You've met them in church and in our small community, Sunday community groups and a bunch of different places. But I just want to again welcome and recognize the new members that have joined our body. So Chris DeScenzo, Bobby and Chad Fallon, Megan Yakim, Elena and Alex Hunson, and Sylvia Pearson. Welcome. Some of you are here. And I love this part because that's really the excitement of seeing how our community has grown and continues to grow through the years. There are also membership reductions. Those are listed in your packet if you want to see the list of people who have moved on. Typically, they've moved geographically or changed churches, so that list is also available in your packet. All right, the 5th item on our agenda is the election of new board members. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, is there anyone who has not received a ballot to vote for board members? You should have gotten one when you came in. So if anyone has not received one, wave your hands, and Karen and Eddie Christensen will bring some ballots around for you and pass those out while we're talking. This is a election of board members is by written ballot. So as I'm talking, you can be looking through that, thinking who you're affirming on the ballot this year, and then Eddie and Karen will collect the ballots and take them back to be counted in a moment. So our returning board members this year are Jana Alexander, Mark Gorham, and Kevin Montgomery. They are in the middle. We elect people to 2-year terms, so they've completed 1 year of their 2-year terms and are moving into their 2nd year. Those standing for re-election are Cindy Anderson, who is standing for her 2nd term, Michelle Barnhill, who's standing for her 5th term, Mary Crocco for her 3rd term. Although she cheated, she actually did a full 5 terms, stepped off the board, and so this is her 3rd term of her 2nd run. So she gets the award of having put up with us for a very long time. Nan Nordstrom, standing for her 2nd term. Myself as board chair, standing for my 3rd term, my 1st term as board chair, and Kerry Vermeer, standing for his 4th term. So a quick note on that, Kerry stepped down partway through the year, and I stepped into the chair role in a provisional category. So this is my 1st year being voted into board chair, but I've been fulfilling the role for a few months. So if you're wondering I thought Tim was already board chair, but you said this is your first time. So this is my first official election in the board chair role. So the way this works, you should have a ballot if you're a church member or a fellowship member. You can vote. A check in the box for any of those names is an affirmation of that person for the board. If you want a no vote, leave their name blank. Yes, Elliot?
I'm just curious, is there a reason why it's unbalanced? Like we're electing 6 this year versus 3 that are returning or continuing?
Yes and no. The reason is just the natural ebb and flow of people coming and going that we ended up off balance in our years, but we're kind of working, and once you get off balance, it's hard to bring it back because people naturally step off at certain intervals. But that part of our long-term process with Vital Church Ministry stuff is reevaluating board terms and board numbers and things like that. So we're kind of trying to rebalance, but it takes a few years of intentional additions and subtractions to get there. So the fastest way to do that would be for me just to resign, and that would take 1 down, but they tell me I shouldn't do that, so. Thank you, yeah. All right, so go ahead and fill those out, and I'm going to have Eddie and Karen bring baskets around to collect those, and they will be counted during the rest of this meeting. So as they pass the baskets, just put your ballots in there. We also have some absentee ballots that will be included with that. All right. So technically, there is a motion put forward to re-elect the following board members to additional 2-year terms. So if somebody could make that motion. Dwayne Soley. And we have a second on the motion to elect the following board members. Thank you, Cheryl Heathcote. All right, any discussion or conversation around that? Excellent. The voting will commence as they collect your ballots. At this point, we're going to move on to items 6 and 7 on your agendas in your packet around the finances of the church. So I'm going to invite Mark Gorham to come up, and I have to apologize up front. In setting up the flow of the day, I contacted people and made sure we had people to greet you and welcome you and to count your ballots and to serve as ushers, and I forgot to contact Mark and say, are we planning to be in the same space here? And so this morning I said, you're doing this, right? And he said, yes, I am. So I kind of put Mark on the spot to come up, but he is very well familiar with the numbers and will do a great job of kind of walking us through there. I realize they're small on the screen. You may have a hard time reading those, but they are all printed. The same thing is printed in your packets. So Mark, why don't you come up and walk us through the budget numbers, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Tim. I'll try to do my best. I prepared for a minute here, so anyway. I'll walk you through the asset side of the balance sheet side, which is on the screen here. I don't know who has the control of the slides, but we'll get to the income statement, which I think is more interesting. On the asset side, there's just a couple things that maybe I'll call out. On the cash and cash equivalents, when we think about funds, one of the things, actually we'll have if people want the actual final numbers, let me know or Lucy know, and we can give you those. But we kind of improved this, the way we laid this out, and the reason I'm trying to talk about this, when I think about cash assets and what's restricted, what's the board can deal with, or not deal with, make decisions on the cash or equivalent side, and really it's really on the net asset side. We have about $824,000 in cash right now. Looking at that, there's a couple things I wanted to call out that aren't well noted here, but we have about $2,000 that are directly designated to camp scholarships, so that's something that goes directly to that. There's donor restricted funds that we deal with at times. We have about $23,000, almost $24,000 in there that's directed to the facility. And then the other thing, and I'll get to this a little later, but around Jonathan House giving, we have about $14,000 that was committed at church at the Christmas giving, and that is restricted to Jonathan House for next year, right now into this fiscal year. So those are some things that are kind of restricted on how we deal with assets, but the board continues to manage the unrestricted side of it. The other thing I'll maybe go down and list here a little bit, you'll see a $19,000 number right at the bottom in the lower left, construction in progress. So this is a project that's actually wrapped up now. It was the parking lot, the redoing the parking lot and the painting. That gets set up as an asset and kind of gets depreciated over time. And then the other thing I think that's worth, I think I covered most of what I wanted to cover on this, but at the end of the day, these assets are really changing, I think, from three things. One is how well we managed our revenue and expense for the year. The parking lot is, which I called out, which is an asset, and then there's general depreciation that shows up on here. So the depreciation is around $42,000. The parking lot I mentioned was about $20,000. And then now I'm going to flip over. I don't know if there's we can flip to the next slide. We'll cover the income. And this is, I think, the good news story on the way this year has played out. We started this year assuming we'd have a deficit at the end of the year of about $82,000. We ended the year at $8,400, So nearly a 90% reduction in that the deficit, and it was driven by several things that I think I'll call out real quick. Around the giving side, we had budgeted $763,000. Make sure I'm quoting the same numbers that's on the screen, but anyway, and we ended up at $766,000. So actually, we exceeded budget. There's an important piece in there that we have to I want you to hear and understand. General contributions, church giving to the church for management of operation and so on, was $735,000 budgeted. $15,000 was we kind of assume as a Christmas giving. We had Christmas giving and giving to Ukraine. That $15,000, we had giving that exceeded about $34,000 for the year. So what we're trying to figure out and manage through this is the giving of the church for the operations has gone from $735,000. It ended up at $728,000, so it's been declining. But this extra giving, which is just as important, has actually exceeded our expectations in budgeting that we had set up. So that's one thing on the giving side. Maybe I'll talk quickly how we're thinking about budgeting that item for next year. We are aware of some of the members that are leaving and that there's going to be additional pressure on that. So we've actually taken the $762,000 actual, and we're going to budget $720,000. So we're taking a very conservative view. We still think there's still some pressure here, and that's broken in up into a $705,000 general giving and another $15,000 on Christmas giving. So we every year they re-baseline that Christmas giving to $15,000, and then we assume there's going to be some additional pressure on the general giving for next year. Again, it's a conservative view, which I think is important as we continue to work through the transition. On the expense side, this is, again, the big driver of our deficit. We were actually to the good $70,000 at the end of the year. It was driven from a couple things. If you look at the staff and facility line, think about those together. We've needed to hire a cleaning crew to come in here. That falls under one line versus staff. And so there's been kind of flip-flopping of expenses and how we are covering operations here. Like Kara's position is on the staff line, but now it's kind of changing over a little bit into facilities and through volunteers. Operations was actually to the good of about $11,000. The call out here is about $6,400 in our pastoral search committee expenses are getting carried over next year. So that's an important piece of that line. So it's not a true underspend, it's a deferral of expense. Worship, was lighter this year as Devin went through his sabbatical and as we were bringing in musicians that helped there, and as well as we are currently from a staffing of the media group or the AV group. That's all volunteer at this point, so that was another saving for that line. Community care, were another just general underspend. And then at the end, and then the other big one on note on here is the outreach. So we actually, it's good or bad, I'll just say it, I don't necessarily like the way it played out, but we actually underspent on outreach. And so part of that was really driven by, I think there was an opportunity to find new ministries to support, and that's something that was kind of a miss as this year played out. And Devin and I and others have talked about how to improve on that for next year. So that's how this year's played out. When I talk about the income for budgeting next year, on the expense, on the ministry side, looking at staff and facilities, again, this is management of who are we contracting versus who's staff, considering Kara's position, considering what we think might be in a reasonable time a senior pastor will come into place. So that's kind of all accounted for on those two lines. Worship kind of got reset again, thinking about musicians on the stage and so on. And then the commitment on the outreach side to kind of bring that back up to where we believe is the right number. It's about 10% of our giving targets. So putting those two together, we get to, we're entering we believe another deficit year this year that we're in right now, actually, of $16,000. It's again, it's part of a conservatism a little bit on the giving side and being sensitive there, but also I think some of the expense levels are lower, and we think it's a much manageable thing. The other call I should have, and I don't have the exact numbers, but of that 16,000, there is probably, if we think about us a year from now, and think about a senior pastor in place, all the pastoral search committee expenses are, and in any other transitional, we believe that 16,000 with this giving level and these expenses, the staffing line would come down and actually become a zero number. So we actually believe we're on track to hit a neutral number in next year. And the 16,000 right now is more representative of still kind of some of the transitional costs we're going through. So that's it for my summary. I don't know if there's questions, or do we want to do questions later?
Yeah, let's give people a second to stew on this and think of their questions, then I'll put you on the spot again. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
So we'll flip to the next slide here. So there is again, put out a motion to approve the 22-23 annual budget. Ignore what's typed on the screen. I often say that COVID was like a parenthetical year that just never happened, so I'm still not sure what year it is. Okay, so the motion is to approve the 2022-23 annual budget as Mark has presented. So I need somebody. Let's get the motion first, and then we can have conversation about it. Do we have a motion? Elliot? Do we have a second? Second, Warren? Okay, question.
There was a line called
New.
line that was called initiative. Was that new initiative on one?
Tamara, can you back up a slide here?
What was that line representing?
So the question is, there's a new category listed about 6 from the bottom there, and what does that new money represent? So
there seems to be a labeling problem. I just realized that number, sorry,
here we go. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you. Looking at this, and I apologize for this, the labeling is a little bit off here. The outreach line is the 97,000 in 2021, and it's going to be a 74,000 in 2022. New initiatives is a single line. somehow it's not quite right.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's wrapped like that. It's kind of actually amazing when I think about it. But anyways, the new initiatives is at $4,000. That was transitional cost for this year. We underspent that this year, and then we kind of go back to where we were in 2021, where we keep about $1,000 for anything that might come up from a new initiative perspective. Rather small, but that is, thanks for the question, but that new initiatives is that very last line.
Okay, so the 97,000 is referring to
The outreach budget.
outreach budget. So it looks like we're off by,
We're off a little bit. I don't know.
yeah.
Something's not lying. I'm sorry, if you look at this page versus what got handed out, there's a youth label that actually is not on
omitted
this
here.
screen. But it's actually on the line. So the youth line would be the 24,000, nope, would be the 6,800.
Okay,
No,
so
it's-
what's labeled as children here should be youth, and everything should move down
It's off
a line. But in your packets, it should be listed correctly, right?
It doesn't quite line up very well in the packets even. It's that this is all not lined up. You could draw. Thank
Yes.
you. Yep.
So we're voting on what's in the packet for 22-23, not what's on the screen for 21-22. So just ignore the screens. It's vaguely possible that somebody stayed up too late some night this week, pick your night, putting the slides together. So I'll just toss that out there. Okay, thank you, Rick, for clarifying that. Does that make sense?
So the total at the bottom is correct for the total.
Yes. Correct. So the total at the bottom is correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So the question is, given the high inflationary state that we're in, is that baked into the budget, and how does that play out as we anticipate the year ahead? So, Mark, do you want to respond to that, or? Do you hear that low grumbling in the distance? That's the sound of the bus that I just threw Mark under.
You know, I wouldn't say, I'll be honest, it wasn't explicitly baked into this thing. I think you have to consider staffing and outreach are really the biggest drivers of our budget. So the staffing, it's something we will watch and monitor and to have discussions as a board throughout the year. And then outreach will kind of depend on how giving kind of plays out. So the rest of it, they are small when you think about what's in the total expense line here, but we'll manage that throughout the year. So to your question, it was not explicitly baked into these numbers, but it was talked about.
Yeah. And just to clarify, the numbers that come in terms of the ministry expenses, you might as well, are solicited from our staff who are over those ministry areas. So Mark connects with them and asks for numbers that they're anticipating. So they may have in their own mind thought, well, as we're looking ahead at worship for next year, however Devin computed the worship expenses coming, that's what was brought back to the board, and then we do that. So the individual ministry areas, they're anticipating their own expenses on that, and then getting approval through the board. But then the giving is a straight percentage. We have reached a certain percentage level where we just say whatever our anticipated budget for the year is, our outreach and giving comes as a 10% off of that. That's how we budget it. But it's broken up a little bit, so it doesn't necessarily show in one line item, because there's giving as outreach in different categories, but that's how we determine that. So really it comes back to the staffing question and how we're working to support our staff as we move forward. Yeah, Warren.
How is the salary for the new pastor figured into the line? Is it full, partial year?
Yeah, it's an assumption, right? We baked in that they would be in place in February. I'm sorry. It's an assumption, but we baked in that he would be in place, or she would be in place in February. Now it's kind of the assumption we made for this setting.
Yeah. And we continue to pay for the interim pastor's salary as well. So there's, it kind of works across the board for that.
Yep.
So the question was, is the new pastor's salary, how is that figured in there? I didn't repeat that question. Other questions on the budget? Anticipations here. All right, we have a motion and a second. I just want to call out, Mark already mentioned this, but I'm just going to observe it one more time because I think it's worth saying. We expected an $80,000 deficit this year, and we talked a lot about that at this annual meeting last year. There was long conversation about what that deficit meant. And through the grace of God and by the generosity of a bunch of people here, we have not hit that deficit mark anywhere close to it. We've really shrunk the deficit down, which is amazing. And I want to give special recognition to our staff and pastors because I don't know quite how they did it, but the way they were able to do ministry and still turn around under budget spending across the board is pretty remarkable. And so I just want to, again, acknowledge the hard work, and a lot of that is because they put in extra time and hours. They called on you to volunteer and support instead of paying people to do different processes. So it is remarkable that we're at this space with our budget this year. We recognize we're looking at a deficit for a second year in a row. It's as small as we could get it to be. And it really comes back to, again, that continued generosity of giving and volunteering and stepping into spaces where we say, I can give my time and talents to things to help keep the numbers lined up. So I'm actually really excited about what's been put together here and look forward to that. So with that in mind, we're going to put this to a voice vote. All in favor of approving the 2022-23 annual budget as it's printed in your packets, not on the screen. All in favor, aye? All opposed? Nay. Okay, Motion seconded, carried. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. We are going to move on to item number 8 on your agenda. And as we're getting there, I mentioned that I lit the candle as a reminder of Jesus' presence in this space with us. And I think that he is actually really happy to watch communities work through things the way City Church does. And I'm super excited about that. The other piece up here is the tablecloth that I threw across there. And that's actually an Indonesian men's skirt. I don't remember the name of it. But a friend of mine who was a missionary in Indonesia gave that to me many years ago for his wedding. And I put that up there as a reminder that the work we're doing here and the nature and character of City Church is not just about what's happening in this room, but it's another visual reminder that we're actually about reaching out. We're actually about the community and the world around us and bearing that light of Christ into the world around us. So the conversations we're having, approving budgets with a pretty significant outreach funding is all part of who we are. We are Jesus people doing what Jesus people do, and that's loving each other, and that's loving God. So I'm super excited to be here with you all. Mark mentioned that part of our giving last year, part of the savings was that we didn't spend all the money we earmarked for outreach. And so we're working really hard because that's not money that should be going back into our reserves. That's money that we really want to be used to bless the world around us. So with that, we're going to transition to a report on the Jonathan House. Another big conversation we had last year. I mean, this was probably the biggest conversation I've ever seen at a church board meeting or an annual meeting, was around the Jonathan House and setting aside and committing a portion of our reserve savings to help fund the Jonathan Houses. If you're not familiar with Jonathan House, it's a ministry of International Association for Refugees. The Jonathan Houses are a model where IAFR partners with local churches to provide housing for asylum seekers who are in a legal process waiting for their documentation, waiting for permission to remain in the United States. So they've fled oppression, persecution, war. They've made it to the U.S. and they said, I need asylum here, I need to be a refugee. And they're in this process, which can take 6 months to as much as 18 months or 2 years. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to receive social services. So there's a big gap in how we care for those people. The Jonathan Houses are set up as a structured community support for them. It gives housing, it gives social and community support, so there's language lessons, there are classes in how to integrate, how to do life here, how to pay bills, and how to use the funny gas stove in the kitchen, and how to go shopping at the grocery store. So we help people move through all of those pieces of doing life together. As well, there are Bible studies hosted that people are invited to. There's opportunity for Christian community that people are invited to. There's just opportunity for community in general. Once a month we host breakfasts that anyone in the community, partner churches or friends or Jonathan House residents, all come together and just spend a morning together one Saturday a month. So it's a pretty cool program. City Church last year committed a chunk of money to start a City Church Jonathan House project. We have not utilized that money yet because we determined that it was not feasible to either purchase or build a permanent home at this point. So instead, we've signed a lease. We rent part of a house right over on Nicollet Avenue. And our Christmas offering this year was designated to helping offset the rent for that for the next year. That happened in December. The papers were all signed early in the year. We committed with IAFR to do this. And I think we finalized things right around May, and by June we had our first family moving in. And the difference between the City Church Jonathan House and the others that already exist is that this one is expressly for families. The others are for single men and single women and children that accompany them. So we have a family, a mother, and 2 children moved in June. They're from a Spanish-speaking country. I can't give a lot of details. I wanted to have pictures up here, but because of the nature of their story, we can't publish a lot of photos. So I was going to put a picture of the house, but it's really not that exciting of a house. So we decided it would be better just to leave all that off. But a mom and 2 children, so a high school student and her younger son moved in, and within about 3 weeks, it became a mom and her 3 children when she gave birth. Literally went to the hospital like 3 days after she moved in. It was a false alarm. She went home, and then she gave birth a couple weeks later. So she now has a newborn and her young son and her high school daughter. They're doing really well. Members of our community have reached out to them, have done translating for them, have engaged in conversational kind of outreach and relationships with them. We actually have a number of fluent Spanish speakers in our congregation that have reached out. It was really fun. About 3 weeks ago, I got to go to a wedding of one of my IAFR colleagues, and because of who they are, they invited all the Jonathan House residents. So we had Africans, Middle Eastern, we had this family came and joined us. So all 4 of them came, and it was so delightful to see them smiling and laughing, and to see the young boy just running all kind of crazy through the wedding. And because it was an IAFR staff person, she just laughed. She's like, "This is great. I love kids running up and down the aisle in my wedding." So I just want to report that things are going really well. The family is thrilled to be here and in partnership with this church, and we are looking for ways to creatively open more doors for connection as they get more and more comfortable. Understandably, this mom, upon arriving in the U.S., she was very hesitant to invite people into the home. There's still a lot of security risks for her. She feels very vulnerable for herself and her kids. But she's warming up to the point now she's going to weddings. She's letting some people that she's built relationship with take the kids to the park for the day, take her shopping and things like that. So we're working on developing more opportunities for direct engagement with our Jonathan House partners. So you can be praying. Again, I can't share a lot of the details, but definitely be praying for this family in the Jonathan House as they're proceeding through their process. And we look forward to welcoming more families to come. So the big question around it then is, what about the money that we committed at our last annual meeting, and what's that all going to look like? We're holding on to that. We're aware of that within the reserve budgets, that's kind of been tagged as partnership money, but we're waiting to see what the right timing and the right approach is to really put that into action when it comes time to buy a place, build a place, or how we want to walk through that. So be watching. At this point, we'll be paying the rent on this lease for the remainder of the year, and then we'll figure out what happens next. All right? And a special thank you to Cheryl Heathcote, who has been kind of the ministry partner connection with this. Each of our outreach ministries has a congregational connection person, so you'll be hearing more from those people as the months roll on. All right, so we're now going to jump from item number 8 to item number 10 on your agenda. Item number 10 introduces the objectives for the year. Now you might be wondering, why is he passing item number 9 up? And it's because item number 9 is also item number 11. And I thought we didn't want to talk about it twice, so we're going to wait and talk about it afterwards. All right, so if you notice in there, there might be the same thing printed twice with slightly different words. We'll come back to that. This is my favorite part of the morning. This is actually what I've been waiting for, is to talk about our objectives for this next year, for 2022 and 23. Every year, the board takes objectives that our senior pastor has handed to us, and we look at those and we establish what is going to be our rudder for the next year. What is it in this next year that's going to be guiding us forward as a community? And then the board gets to bring those to you at the annual meeting and say, this is kind of where we're going. So last year, our objectives were built around the ideas of connect and contribute. We were in a transitional year, and we felt it important to invite people and remind people of the importance of connecting with our local body and contributing in significant, tangible ways through volunteer, through worship together, through your giving, all those pieces. This year, because we're still in transition and because we have an intentional interim pastor, And so the idea of, and anticipate calling a senior pastor, the idea of asking in that realm for this interim pastor to create the objectives for another pastor who's coming in and do all that kind of stuff, we've kind of changed it around a little bit. Our objective for the year is deeper. And part of what we've done is gone to our staff pastors, and they've each set goals for themselves and given a report on their annual ministry. That can be found in the packet. We're not going to go over all those here, but I encourage you to read through those because they express the heart of our pastors and what they're anticipating in the year ahead. And then Rich took those and brought them back to the board along with his annual report, which gives us a great update on the Vital Church Ministry recommendations. So again, that's in the packet. He goes line for line through all 9 of those and kind of updates what the church is doing with those. And then we took those and kind of looked for threads and themes that emerged from all of these different sources and goals. And what we came to is the concept of deeper. And so I'm going to actually jump back a couple of slides here, if we can. There we go. And I'm just going to read the first part of Psalm 1, because I think this really captures where we're going. How blessed is the one who does not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand in the pathway with sinners, or sit in the assembly of scoffers. Instead, they find pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. They meditate on his commands day and night. And this is a key verse. They are like a tree planted by flowing streams. It yields its fruit at the proper time, and its leaves never fall off. They succeed in everything they attempt. And the vision here is this tree that's rooted deeply in a desert land by a stream of living water. And its roots are going down and pulling that water, that moisture, that life-giving nourishment up and growing as a tree. There's internal strength there, but there's also this sense of reaching out. It enables the fruiting of the tree. It enables the branches to spread. So if you're here in the springtime and maybe attended some of our focus summits, at one of the focus summits, we asked people to draw, there were tables, all given big sheets of paper, and said, draw kind of your vision of what the future of City Church, the shape of City Church, the heart of City Church is. And so these drawings emerge, and it was really interesting to see that 3 of the 4 drawings that came out were trees. And I think at least 2 of them were by streams of water. And that was a really fun theme. The 4th one was around the building of the church as a place of gathering for the community. So there's this strong sense of growing stronger, and through that strength, reaching out into the community and the world around us. And that's what has been expressed by the congregation, and so it made a lot of sense then to let that inform the year ahead. So we're moving towards a year of going deeper. There is, I'm going to credit Amy, Pastor Amy, with this, and I think it's a reflection from Dallas Willard, but there's a great definition of spiritual formation. And a lot of people go, spiritual formation, yeah, that's kind of weird. It's like putting candles and tablecloths out at an annual meeting. I'm not sure we should be doing spiritual formation. But I just want to read this because I think this really captures the heart of what the church, and hopefully City Church, is about. Spiritual formation, both as individuals and as a community, we're all formed, is a process of being conformed by the power of the Holy Spirit to the image of Jesus Christ. Why? For the glory of God and for the sake of others. That's the heartbeat of the church. And so as we think about these objectives of going deeper, the intent is not just that we become inward focused, we're all about City Church and we're doing all these cool events and it's going to be this kind of cool club that we have that loves Jesus. It's about being transformed into Jesus' image so that we're healthy to reach out for the sake of others. So we came up with 5 objectives. So I'm just going to briefly go over these 5. They're printed in your packet, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on them. But our 5 objectives for this upcoming year: deeper faith. We need to be a church that's about developing in our relationships individually and as a community with God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit through a growing commitment. So this is our call, a growing commitment to prayer, intentional faith formation, how we grow in our faith, and teaching opportunities. And that's particularly in our Sunday morning communities and what we're hearing from the pulpit and the teaching that we'll receive in the year ahead. Our second objective is deeper relationships. And this looks like people regularly coming together in our growth groups and our Sunday morning communities, our City Kids ministries, our Velocity ministry, people meeting regularly, coming together in ways that allow us to shape life and to shape our community together. Our third objective is deeper discipleship. And this is about developing a consistent and growing rhythm of things that mark discipleship: service, involvement in worshiping together, and giving to the needs of the church. Those are kind of earmarks of people who are disciples of Jesus, display their faith in tangible ways. Number 4, deeper presence. And this really is pointing at strategically connecting with both the local community, Southwest Minneapolis, the Kenny neighborhood, but also the global community, through increased participation with City Church Outreach Strategic Plan. So that came out last year, and we looked at all of our ministry partnerships and encouraged people to connect with things like Jonathan House, things like CES, to connect with our partners NIIP in India, and become involved in life-changing ways in the community around us. It also means reaching out to your neighbors. It means developing friendships in your own neighborhood that reflect the person of Jesus Christ. And then the 5th one, deeper foundations. Strengthening City Church by calling a new senior pastor and ensuring adequate staff support. So Eddie and Karen, I'm going to ask if you would hand out those extra sheets. And I'm just going to keep talking a little bit while they pass these out, so everyone's going to get one of these. The first 4 are really things that depend on us as a congregation together, how we engage in church together, and in the leadership of our staff and pastors. Those are kind of the drivers between the first 4. It's about making sure that we are doing what the church is called to do and growing in it together. The 5th one is a little bit more on leadership. It's coming to the board and our interim pastor, intentional interim pastor, Rich. So a couple of specific goals that I wanted to highlight, because there are no goals for that. Each pastor put out goals, so what are the measurable goals for these objectives? Look through what the pastors have submitted in your packet. They each have 3 to 4 goals that they're highlighting. This one doesn't have specific goals, so I want to highlight a couple. The first is, we are, in response to the focus summits that we went through, it became apparent that our purpose statement as a church, which historically has been love God, love others, is catchy and memorable, but it doesn't really define a lot of City Church's purpose in ways that couldn't be redefined by hundreds of other churches or non-Jesus following communities around the world would claim those same words. We're all about loving God and loving others. So it's fantastic and it's biblical, and we want to retain love God, love others. But we felt like there was a need for a deeper purpose statement. So coming out of the Focus Summits and all the input we gathered, the Focus team fashioned a new purpose statement and passed it on to the board. The board has adopted that as a provisional purpose statement that we're going to work with over the next year. And that is, City Church, this is who we are, why we exist, what we do. City Church is a Christ-centered community inviting all people to grow in the transforming grace of Jesus, inward, deeply rooted growth, and demonstrating the love of God to the world, the outreach piece that shows us reflecting God's love into the world around us. City Church is a Christ-centered community inviting all people to grow in the transforming grace of Jesus and demonstrating the love of God to the world. So that's been provisionally accepted by the board. We're going to play with it for a year. You're going to start seeing communication come out around that. Our staff and Rich are playing with ways to really implement what this purpose looks like and how we utilize it. And we'll maintain that tagline, love God, love others, because it really is a core part of our identity and history. And next year, we anticipate at the annual meeting, once we've had some time to really work this through, it will probably be part of some constitutional amendments that we're going to recommend, and there will be an opportunity to vote on that as a body. So this is provisional, but you're going to start seeing this show up in places. So that's one part of going deeper in our foundations. Another goal that we have is around the, back up one, around the calling of our next senior pastor. Our goal, this is a little tricky, our goal as a board is to identify and invite a new senior pastor by April 2023. In just a minute, we're going to go back to item 9/11, and Elliot's going to come up and talk about the pastor search committee. What this means, because really the pastor search committee is the one driving the search and investing in finding our next pastor and discerning who that is. But we realize that the board has a strong component in opening up the road and freeing the committee to do what they need to do. So we are committing as a board to do what we can to support the pastor search committee, to allow them to identify, to go through applications and candidacies and all these things, identify our next senior leader, and invite them to come and join us. Now, of course, it's up to them whether they accept that invitation or not by April. There are a lot more steps between here and there. Elliot's going to talk about some of those, so don't think, it's going to be April, what's going on? There's stuff's happening, it's cool. The second goal up there is to ensure that our staff structure is sufficient to support the health and ministry of City Church. So this looks like evaluating our staffing and making sure that we have the resources we need for the staff to be successful and to have the right staff in place to support our community and our ministries and everything we're called to do, such as filling the vacant facilities manager position. Latrellis Holden stepped out a few weeks ago. We've been managing or trying to manage with a gap in that, and it's been really weighty for our intentional interim pastor Rich and our entire staff and pastors. It has been very weighty to try and manage the facilities without Latrellis. Jack Frangipane and Kevin Montgomery and a team of volunteers have stepped into the gap to help. I am thrilled to say that we can tick that little bit off because we have actually invited Daryl Fast to step in as our new facilities manager, which is super exciting. So we're already a step ahead on our goals for 2023. We have somebody in that position, but we're going to continue as a board to monitor our staff and make sure that we have the right resources available to be supporting the church. With Kara leaving in the transition of our pastor, we're just aware that there's a lot of stuff that needs attention and massaging and make sure that all the gaps are filled. Okay? Those are the objectives for 2022-23 as proposed. A quick detail note. On page 11 of your packet are Amy's report and her goals for the next year. Mistakenly, one of those, the dates was printed wrong, so assembling a team to support the work she's doing, there's calling together a volunteer team that says it's going to happen by May of 2023. That should say May of 2024, so if it doesn't get done this spring, it's not her fault, that's intentional. And the reason for that is a lot of the people who make up that are already busy doing a bunch of things in the church, like the pastor search committee. So she recognizes that to bring a team of volunteers together is going to take a little bit more time. So understand that's intentional. That should read 2024. Other than that, you have all of the pastor's goals and stuff ahead of you. So I would like to ask for a motion to approve the 2022-23 City Church annual objectives for Deeper. Elliot Warden. Do we have a second? And there's a second. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up for questions and conversation around this. Does anybody have any questions about the things that are driving us and motivating us into the next year? Yeah, Chris.
Is there a way to summarize the City Church outreach strategic plans
That's great. So Chris asked if there's a way to summarize the City Church Outreach Strategic Plan and to identify what that's about. So a year ago, a team came around Kara and met over, I think, like 9 months, 6, 8, 9 months, something like that, and looked at every outreach ministry we're involved in, every ministry partnership, and kind of evaluated where we are in terms of our connection, our giving, our support, the work that they're doing, the alignment, the needs. They just spent hours and hours and hours looking at all that, and then came back with a revised list of our ministry partners. There were literally some partners who were saying, look, we've got a really strong giving base. We don't necessarily need to be taking that. There were other partners who had changed their focus or strategies, and we said, that's not quite in alignment with what we need to be doing. And that revised list then is what we are focusing our outreach efforts on, both financially and raising volunteers. I think there are about 12 ministries that we partner with. I can't go through each one of those, but that information is available if anyone's interested. But that's what that strategic ministry plan looks like, identifying the 12, the ways that we're engaging with them, and kind of forecast for the future. And that is also up for constant revision. We want to keep revisiting that to make sure we're doing the right things that make sense for City Church to be doing based on all kinds of factors. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Other questions around the objectives? No? For people online, I apologize. I don't have a way to hear your questions, but if you yell really loud at your TVs, it might. I don't know. Okay. So all in favor of approving the 2022-23 City Church annual objectives? Aye? Aye. All opposed? Nay? Okay, motion so carried. We're going to move on to item number 11, because we skipped number 9, and I'm going to ask Elliot Warden to come up and give you an update on, oh wait, as he's coming, you can keep coming, Elliot. One of the things kind of coming out of that deepening our foundations and caring for our pastors, I just want to affirm again, our pastoral staff and our staff have worked so hard in the last year, 18 months to keep us going on track. If you are a pastor of City Church or you're on staff here, if you could just kind of close your ears for a minute, because this is really awkward to be involved in. But they have gone above and beyond, and we want to take an opportunity to bless them with some tangible encouragement. So I would invite you, if you're here, if you're a member, if you're a regular attender, if you're watching online, to in the next couple weeks, just jot down a thank you note or something of encouragement that we would like to pass on to our pastors. We'll get those to Nan Nordstrom, who's going to kind of compile everything and shape it all, and then is going to be given to the various staff members that we have. So I know it's awkward to ask that in front of our pastors, which is why they're not listening right now. But the reality is we realized this is great. We all want to be about doing this. We want to do it. Okay, how are we going to do it? What are the mechanics of it? Well, the people that we would ask to help us with that are all people on staff. Like, can we put it in the newsletter? Sure, send it to JT. Can we have it announced in front? Yeah, sure, have Amy announce it. So we thought this is the best place to do it. But in the next couple of weeks, just get some notes of encouragement to Nan, and we'll distribute those. We just want to have an extra way to say thank you to the pastors and the staff that have kept us going over the past several months. And now, Elliot, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. So the Pastoral Search Committee at the end of September decided where to post our opening, and we settled on a list of 8 seminaries, and then a couple job posting sites that are strictly involved with pastoral job postings, and then as well as our Converge. Converge has a job board. Converge is our denomination. And so those have been up since the end of September, about September 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in there. So that was all Rick, who did all that work. So we appreciate his efforts in that. And then those will be up until October 31st. And then that's when we kind of are a little bit hands-off for a little bit. That is when P3 starts looking at the people who have entered their pool of pastoral candidates. They do a lot of different matchmaking things. They look at personality assessments, ministry assessments, job histories, things like that. And they narrow the list down to somewhere between 3 and 6 candidates that they will then present to us. And from there, our job really picks up. We're doing some first round interviews over video or phone. We look at the candidates that they've presented to us and kind of see, okay, this person looks like they might be a good fit. We have a second interview with them, which is more in depth, and then eventually for the people who we are especially interested in, the 1 or 2, we will invite them for a third interview and a candidating weekend. And so this takes place over the next several months. So right about the P3 process takes about 4 to 5 weeks. So we're thinking early to mid-December, we will start seeing candidate profiles and really starting to intensely go through them. And then just depending on availability for candidates, for interviews and things like that, will determine how the process plays out from there. But like Tim said, we're hoping by April of next year we will have our candidate identified and an offer for them on the table, and God willing, they will accept. So, am I missing anything, Rick, Tim, Megan? So we are not actually receiving applications. The job posting, the posts that we put up on these various seminary websites, direct them to P3, and from there they enter this candidate pool. They can make a note of if they're like entering specifically because they're interested in our church, but it's not only people who are directly applying for our open position, it's people that might already be in the pool that have been looking, and so really it's just them kind of looking at the number of people that they have and narrowing it down to the 3 to 6 that they're going to present to us.
Are we looking within certain just our denomination, or can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the question was, are we just looking within our denomination? The P3 service that we are using is part of our denomination, but that doesn't mean it's strictly pastors who have been part of a church within Converge previously. And so it can be people who are fresh out of seminary. It can be really anybody can enter this job pool, or this candidate pool rather, but they're looking for people who are going to align with our beliefs. And so part of the narrowing down process is they're looking at we filled out a pretty robust church profile, and they're looking for people who will align with our beliefs. And so if somebody has biblical beliefs that might not necessarily be part of who we are, not like I'm sorry, say that again. Yeah, and so that's one of the benefits of going with one of the reasons we went with P3 as the service that we decided to use is because they have a very robust process that helps identify the candidates that are going to match up with our beliefs and our objectives and who we are as a church. And it takes a lot of that off of our plate. Instead of us receiving all of the resumes and cover letters and having to go through them on our own, P3 is doing a lot of that initial legwork for us. And so we're based on the successes that, when we were identifying how we were going to approach this pastoral search, we were able to talk to some churches who had used P3 before, and they talked about how it was quite a relief to have all kind of the initial work done by P3 and getting right to the candidates that are going to be ideally the best match. Now there is obviously some some stuff left up to, how would I say this? We're still being diligent. We're still examining. We're not just assuming that these people are going to be great fits and just kind of picking whatever out of a hat. We're going to be doing a lot of work over the next few months with all the interviews that we're doing and talking to references and things like that to make sure that whoever we feel like God is calling to City Church is going to be a great fit for our next season of ministry. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
And again, a word of thanks to our Pastor Search Committee, who became our Transition Team Focus Summit Committee, who went back to being the Pastor Search Committee. These guys, I know there can be a sense of frustration. We're a year out. We don't have a pastor in place. But let me just say they've put in a lot of hours and a lot of heart and prayer into this process. And we are looking forward to what's coming out of that. One further response to the question of applications that Elliot answered really well is that we have, although we don't receive applications to City Church, but we are aware of at least a handful, I think 4 to 6 people we're aware of have applied and marked, they applied because they knew of City Church. So they will go into the pool, and that will also flag them to P3 to say, hey, these are specifically interested in City Church. So we've received, I know at least 4 have said that they've submitted their applications to P3, and I think there were a couple more who also have. So those all go into the pool. And denominationally, we posted at non-denominational seminaries as well, at non-converged seminaries. We're certainly at Bethel, but we're at a bunch of other places as well. So it's a pretty broad net that we're throwing out there. Okay. Yes, Kevin.
That last part that you just talked about, can that be added to that website page that we call updates?
Mm-hmm.
Because, in the weeks now that we've talked about updates, and that thing's been static for the whole time.
Okay.
So it would be encouraging, at least from my perspective, to have what you just said. Yes, we know of 4 candidates or whatever, just to see
Yeah.
that change. I don't know who's responsible for the updating of that page, but
Perfect.
at least from my perspective, it would be nice to see some
More dynamic updating.
on the update page.
Well said. So I will just throw it out to anyone in this audience who's listening and happens to have the password and login for that update page. They might choose to add some additional updates. So we'll talk about that as well at our next PSC meeting. Okay, we're on the home stretch. We have the results right here in this envelope. We have the results. Okay, I'm kidding. So I'm happy to announce that all 6 board members standing for re-election have been approved and will be stuck with me for the next year or 2. Yay! Thank you to our ushers and counters and the people who made that all happen. All right, Q&A. Is there anything that you were really hoping we would talk about here that we haven't, or things we did talk about and you want more answers to? Any more questions there? Give you a moment to mull on that. No? One of the fun things is we've been doing town halls fairly consistently, which is kind of a new thing for City Church. We anticipate continuing that in the fall. We'll get the schedule out eventually for that. But I feel like that helps us we've had lots of chances to ask questions. So hopefully things that you're seeing today aren't like, whoa, where'd that come from? It's stuff that we've been walking along together for a while. So. Okay, well, if there are no questions, I am going to invite Pastor Rich to come up and offer a closing prayer.
Before I lead in closing prayer, this church would not nearly be what we are today without volunteers. And we would just not be a functioning church without you. So we are grateful for those who serve at City Church, individuals who work behind the scenes, City Kids providing Coffee Plus after services, tech volunteers, involvement in leadership of growth groups, Sunday morning communities, Velocity, worship, outreach to our with our partners, prayer ministers, pastoral search committee, the list is long. There's one group I want to single out today, and that is our leadership board. Probably, I'm guessing, maybe for the first time in our history, the board was really responsible for everything in preparation for today. So whereas in the past, your report book was done essentially by a staff member, Kevin Montgomery put it all together using his skills and graphic work. Michelle Barnhill right now is leading a ministry for children. We've had people on the board taking these reports, making sure they were properly being sent out. Everything having to do with this meeting. You know, you see Tim up here leading the effort, but really there's so much that has gone on behind the scenes. And I hope you will join me right now in expressing appreciation to them. Can I do that? Now, I understand after I pray that we're going to sing a song. Is that what it says? We are. Okay. So I'm going to invite you to stand right now as I lead us in prayer and then remain standing for our sung benediction. There you go. Okay, let's pray. Oh, Father, we thank you for City Church, for its history, and for the fact that you are planting this tree and it continues to be nurtured by streams of living water, to bear fruit in every area of life, to serve your purposes in worship and discipleship and outreach and all of these other areas. Thank you for each and every volunteer who serves here. Thank you for the staff, for the leadership board. Thank you for today. As we go through this report book, we're amazed at what you have accomplished in the last 12 months since we last gathered together, and we give you all the glory. We are dependent upon you as we enter into this new year, and we pray that your Holy Spirit will empower us and lead us and use us, that our growth will be rich and glorifying to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
So just before Devin and the team lead us in a sung benediction, I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn this meeting. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor of closing this meeting? Aye. All opposed? Nay?
Sing me the grace. May the grace of Jesus Christ